If you hear a human voice on Erebos, 9 after midnight, don't answer it. Ethan Cole replayed the warning 3 times as his shuttle drifted toward the dead station, hanging above the frozen moon like a rusted wound in space. The massive structure should have been glowing with docking lights and freight traffic, but the only illumination came from scattered red emergency beacons pulsing weakly across the hull. Even from half a mile away, Erebos, 9 looked wrong. Dark, hollow, like something that had stopped breathing a long time ago. Ethan rubbed a hand across the stubble on his jaw and stared through the cockpit glass while the station slowly rotated against the stars. 6 years abandoned. Officially condemned after a containment disaster wiped out the entire crew. Unofficially, people called it the graveyard station. Pilots changed routes to avoid flying near it. Cargo captains swore their comm systems picked up whispers when they passed through the sector. One guy claimed he saw a woman standing inside the observation deck, even though the station had no life support left. Ethan never believed ghost stories. Ghosts didn't lock blast doors from the inside. His shuttle vibrated as the autopilot connected to docking bay 3. Metal groaned somewhere beneath his feet. Warning symbols flashed orange across the console. Low station power. Gravity unstable. Atmospheric integrity partial. Perfect, Ethan muttered. Exactly where they send a guy after 20 years of loyal service. The company called this assignment temporary maintenance oversight. Ethan called it exile with paperwork attached. Ever since the accident on Titan Freight Line 12, nobody wanted him near a command deck anymore. So they sent him here instead, to babysit a corpse floating in deep space. The docking clamps slammed into place with a heavy metallic thud that echoed through the shuttle cabin. Then came silence. No station greeting. No automated customs scan. No human voices. Just the low electrical hum of dying systems somewhere inside the walls. Ethan grabbed his duffel bag, clipped a flashlight onto his jacket, and stepped into the airlock. Cold air wrapped around him instantly. Not freezing, but stale. Recycled. The kind of air that had spent too many years trapped inside metal corridors. The inner hatch hissed open halfway before jerking to a stop. Ethan squeezed through anyway. His boots touched the station floor with a hollow clang. The corridor beyond stretched into darkness lit only by flickering red strips along the ceiling. Shadows twitched across the walls every few seconds as failing lights struggled to stay alive. Ethan scanned the hallway carefully. Dust floated through the air in slow motion. A coffee mug rested beside an overturned toolbox near the wall. Somebody had left in a hurry. Or never left at all. Then he saw the scratches. Deep marks carved into the steel blast door ahead of him. Not random damage. Finger marks. Hundreds of them. Like people had clawed at the metal trying to get out. Ethan's stomach tightened. A sudden burst of static exploded overhead, making him flinch. The station intercom crackled alive. For a second, only distorted breathing filled the corridor. Then a woman's voice whispered through the speakers. Calm. Low. Tired. Turn around before she finds you. The transmission cut instantly. Ethan stood frozen beneath the flickering red lights while somewhere far inside Erebos, 9, a heavy metal door slowly opened. Ethan slowly reached for the flashlight clipped to his jacket while the sound echoed through the station again. Metal scraping against metal. Slow. Heavy. Somewhere beyond the dark corridor ahead. His pulse quickened despite himself. The rational part of his brain searched for explanations. Failing hydraulics. Loose bulkheads. Old machinery shifting after years without maintenance. But the deeper instinct buried inside every human being whispered something much simpler. Leave. The red emergency lights flickered harder now, painting the hallway in pulses of crimson and shadow. Ethan moved carefully past the scratched blast door, boots thudding softly against the steel floor. The station map on his wrist display glitched every few seconds, sectors blinking in and out like dying memories. Most of Erebos, 9 had already lost power completely. Reactor Hall C still showed active energy readings. That alone made no sense. The station should have gone cold years ago. As Ethan rounded the corner, his flashlight beam swept across abandoned luggage scattered near the walls. Children's shoes. A cracked data tablet. A gray blanket folded neatly on a bench. Tiny details frozen exactly where people had left them 6 years earlier. Like the station had swallowed an entire moment and refused to let it go. Then he noticed something else. No dust on the floor ahead. Ethan crouched slightly, studying the corridor. Fresh footprints. Large. Barely visible against the steel. Somebody had walked through here recently. The lights above him buzzed violently. For half a second, the hallway went completely dark. When the power returned, Ethan froze. A figure stood at the far end of the corridor. Tall. Motionless. Watching him. His breath caught in his throat. The woman was at least 7 feet tall, maybe more, her silhouette framed by the faint blue glow leaking from the reactor sector behind her. Dark armor covered one shoulder, while the rest looked pieced together from old station fabric and salvaged plating. Long silver-black hair fell over one side of her face. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Golden. Bright enough to reflect through the darkness like distant stars. Neither of them moved. Ethan felt suddenly aware of every sound inside his own body. His breathing. His heartbeat. The soft creak of his gloves tightening around the flashlight. The woman tilted her head slightly as if studying him. Not like prey. More like a puzzle she was too tired to solve. Then Ethan noticed the marks on the wall beside her. Names. Hundreds of names carved directly into the steel with careful precision. Some human. Some alien. Entire families. Dates beside them. He looked back toward the woman. "You made those?" he asked quietly. Her voice came low and calm when she answered. So somebody would remember them. Not the voice from the intercom. This voice carried weight. Exhaustion. Like every word cost her energy. Ethan swallowed carefully. "You are Veilira." Silence stretched between them. Somewhere deeper in the station, pipes groaned loudly. Steam hissed through unseen vents overhead. Veilira's glowing eyes never left his face. "That name is still alive out there?" she asked. Ethan hesitated. He remembered the files they showed during orientation. The Butcher of Kepri Station. Biohazard survivor. Extreme threat level. Shoot on sight, if necessary. But standing here now, none of it matched the woman in front of him. She did not look dangerous. She looked tired. Veilira slowly stepped aside from the reactor doorway behind her. Blue emergency light spilled across the corridor floor. "If you want to survive this station," she said quietly, "you need to stop walking so loudly." Then somewhere far below them, a child's laughter echoed through the ventilation shafts. Ethan felt the sound before he fully heard it. Soft laughter drifting through the ventilation shafts like air leaking from a cracked memory. A little girl, maybe 6 years old. The kind of laugh that belonged in parks and schoolyards, not inside a dead station hanging beyond the edge of mapped space. His flashlight beam swept upward toward the ceiling vents. "There are children here?" he asked. Veilira's expression changed instantly. Not fear. Worse. Recognition. "Do not answer them," she said quietly. The lights flickered again. Somewhere far below the floor panels, something metallic scraped slowly through the walls. Ethan glanced toward the reactor doorway behind her. Blue light pulsed rhythmically from within, casting shifting shadows across her face. Up close, he noticed how tired she really looked. Small fractures ran through the dark armor wrapped around one shoulder. Her hands carried pale silver scars along the fingers. Even her posture looked heavy, like exhaustion had settled directly into her bones over the years. Yet despite all of it, she still stood between him and the darkness behind her. "You are saying there are no children," Ethan said carefully. Veilira held his gaze for a long moment. "There have not been children on this station for 6 years. The laughter echoed again. Closer this time. Ethan felt a chill crawl slowly down his spine. His rational mind searched desperately for explanations. Old recordings trapped in damaged speakers. Corrupted audio loops. Electrical interference. But deep down, another part of him already understood the truth. The station wanted him to hear it. Veilira stepped toward the reactor hall entrance and motioned for him to follow. "Keep your voice low," she said. "And if you hear somebody calling your name," she paused briefly, "make sure you can see their face first." Ethan followed her into the reactor sector. The temperature rose immediately. Warm air rolled through massive circular chambers lined with ancient coolant pipes and flickering control panels. Unlike the corridors outside, this place was alive. Barely. Emergency generators hummed somewhere beneath the floor, sending vibrations through the metal walkway under Ethan's boots. He stared at the reactor core towering through the center of the chamber. The blue energy field inside pulsed like a giant mechanical heartbeat. "You kept this running alone?" he asked quietly. Veolira moved toward a damaged console without answering immediately. If the reactor dies, she finally said, the seals fail. Ethan frowned. Seals for what? Before she could answer, the station speakers crackled overhead again. This time the voice sounded different. Male. Distorted. Ethan. He froze instantly. The voice belonged to his father. Older. Tired. Exactly as he remembered from the final hospital call 12 years earlier. Ethan slowly turned toward the nearest speaker mounted high above the reactor walkway. Son, the voice whispered weakly. Help me. Every muscle in Ethan's body tightened. Impossible. His father was dead. Veolira moved fast. One hand grabbed the front of Ethan's jacket before he could take another step. Her golden eyes locked onto his with sudden intensity. Do not listen to it. Ethan stared at her, pulse hammering in his ears. How does it know my father's voice? Veolira's expression darkened slightly. Because it listens. Silence settled heavily between them except for the reactor humming below. Ethan noticed then that Veolira was trembling very slightly. Not from fear. From exhaustion. Like somebody who had repeated the same nightmare too many times to count. The speakers crackled one final time. This time the voice sounded almost human again. Calm. Patient. Smiling. She never told you what happened to the crew. The station lights dimmed abruptly. And somewhere beyond the reactor walls, hundreds of footsteps suddenly began moving through the dark. The footsteps stopped all at once. Ethan stood perfectly still beside the reactor console, listening to the silence pressing against the chamber walls. It felt wrong somehow. Heavy. Like the entire station was holding its breath. Veolira released his jacket slowly, but did not step away from him. Her glowing eyes remained fixed on the dark corridor leading deeper into the station. It knows you are here now, she said quietly. Ethan swallowed hard and forced himself to look away from the hallway. You keep saying it. Veolira lowered her gaze briefly toward the reactor floor below them. Blue light rippled across her skin in slow waves. Because giving something a name makes it easier to fear, she said. And fear spreads quickly on this station. Another distant clang echoed through the ventilation shafts overhead. Ethan ran a hand across the back of his neck, trying to steady himself. He had worked cargo routes through pirate sectors, survived decompression failures, watched ships burn apart outside observation windows. But this place unsettled him in ways he could not explain. Nothing here acted naturally. Even the silence seemed alive. Veolira moved toward an old storage locker near the reactor wall and pulled out a small thermal container. Steam escaped softly when she opened it. Ethan blinked in surprise. Coffee. Real coffee. The smell drifted through the cold metal air like a memory from another life. She poured some carefully into 2 worn metal cups. You kept coffee alive for 6 years? Ethan asked. Veolira handed him one of the cups without looking directly at him. People think survival depends on weapons, she said. Most days it is smaller things. Ethan accepted the drink cautiously. The warmth spread through his hands immediately. He had not realized how cold he felt until now. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The reactor hummed softly beneath the walkway, while old pipes clicked and groaned somewhere behind the walls. Ethan glanced toward the names carved into the corridor outside. Those people, he said carefully. What really happened here? Veolira stared into her cup for several seconds before answering. The station received something from a research vessel near the Perseus Drift. Her voice remained calm, but Ethan noticed her fingers tightening slightly around the metal cup. The crew thought it was an organism. She looked up slowly. It was not. Ethan frowned. Then what was it? Veolira's golden eyes reflected the reactor glow like distant firelight. A voice, she whispered. One that learns. The station lights dimmed briefly again. Somewhere above them, faint whispering drifted through the vents. Multiple voices overlapping softly. Human. Alien. Male. Female. Ethan could not make out the words, but something about the sound made his chest tighten. Veolira immediately reached toward a nearby control panel and activated a low-frequency pulse emitter. A deep mechanical hum spread through the chamber. The whispers stopped instantly. Ethan stared at her. You built that. She nodded once. It disrupts the signal for a few minutes. Ethan slowly set his coffee cup down. Signal from where? Veolira hesitated. That frightened him more than anything else so far. Finally, she turned toward the massive reactor core behind them. It lives inside the station now, she said quietly. Inside the walls, the vents, the wiring. Sometimes, her voice lowered further. Inside memories. Ethan felt cold again despite the heat rising from the reactor below. Why stay here alone, he asked. Veolyra looked genuinely confused by the question at first. Then sadness crossed her face so quickly Ethan almost missed it. Because somebody had to lock the door. Silence settled between them again. Then Ethan noticed something near the reactor console. A small photograph taped beside the controls. Faded from heat and time. Human children smiling beside an alien woman with silver black hair. Veolyra saw him looking at it. For the first time since he met her, her voice nearly broke. They stopped speaking after the second year, she whispered. Then somewhere deep in the station, a little girl's voice softly asked, Mom. Ethan could not stop staring at the photograph beside the reactor console. The image was old and slightly warped from years of heat exposure, but the faces were still clear enough to recognize happiness. Two human children sat cross-legged on the floor holding mugs almost too large for their hands, while Veolyra stood behind them with one arm wrapped protectively around both shoulders. The children were smiling. Veolyra was not exactly smiling, but her eyes looked softer there. Lighter somehow. Ethan glanced slowly toward her. Your family. Veolyra did not answer immediately. She picked up the photograph carefully, brushing dust from one corner with surprising gentleness. They were maintenance workers, she said quietly. The station allowed civilian families back then. Ethan nodded once. He remembered hearing about stations like this years ago before the border conflicts expanded. Places where engineers raised children beside cargo bays because deep space contracts paid triple Earth wages. Small artificial towns floating alone among stars. What were their names? Ethan asked. Veolyra stared at the picture for several long seconds. Mila and June. Her voice almost disappeared when she said the names. The little one liked old Earth cartoons. She made me watch the same episode every night for 3 months. Ethan noticed the faintest movement near her mouth. Not quite a smile. More like the memory of one. Then the station lights flickered sharply again. The warmth vanished from Veolyra's face instantly. Somewhere overhead, metal creaked slowly through the ventilation shafts. Ethan looked upward automatically. It copies them, Veolyra said before he could speak. The voices, the habits, the things they loved. She carefully returned the photograph beside the console. At first it only repeated words. Then entire conversations. Ethan felt his chest tighten slightly. And you stayed here listening to that for 6 years? Veolyra leaned back against the reactor console, exhaustion settling visibly across her shoulders. At first I thought maybe some part of them remained. Her golden eyes lowered toward the floor. That hope can make intelligent people very stupid. Silence settled heavily around them again. Ethan took another sip of the coffee, now lukewarm in his hands. He studied the reactor chamber more carefully this time. Blankets folded near the far wall. Repair tools arranged neatly by size. Handwritten notes taped beside old circuit panels. Veolyra had not merely survived here. She had built routines, structure, tiny fragments of normal life inside a graveyard. Ethan slowly realized something else too. Nothing inside the reactor sector looked damaged from fighting. No blast marks. No overturned furniture. No signs of panic. It looked maintained. Protected. You said the station crew blamed you, Ethan said carefully. Veolyra gave a quiet nod. I was security chief. Ethan frowned slightly. Then why are there no signs of violence? Veolyra looked at him directly for the first time in several minutes. Because fear does not always look violent. Before Ethan could respond, the station speakers crackled softly overhead. This time no distorted voices came through. Only music. A slow piano melody drifting faintly through the chamber. Ethan froze. The song hit him immediately. His mother used to play it while cleaning their apartment back in Chicago. He had not heard it in almost 20 years. Veolyra noticed the change in his expression instantly. Do not let it inside your head, she warned quietly. Ethan stared at the ceiling speakers while the music echoed softly through the reactor hall. Warm memories surfaced before he could stop them. Summer rain against apartment windows. The smell of laundry detergent. His mother humming while sunlight crossed the kitchen floor. For one dangerous moment, the station no longer felt cold. Then Ethan noticed something that made his blood run cold instead. The melody was skipping slightly. repeating the same four notes over and over again, like something trying to imitate emotion without fully understanding it. Veilira moved toward the control console quickly and shut the speakers down. Silence slammed back into the chamber. Ethan let out a slow breath he had not realized he was holding. Veilira looked at him carefully. Now you understand why. Nobody leaves quickly once it learns them. Then, somewhere beyond the reactor walls, somebody knocked softly against the metal door 3 times. The knocking came again. 3 soft taps against the reactor door. Patient, gentle, human. Ethan slowly turned toward the sound while every instinct in his body screamed at him not to move closer. Veilira did not even look surprised anymore. That frightened him more than the noise itself. She simply reached for the pulse emitter beside the reactor console and checked its charge level with tired familiarity. It learned manners after the 4th year, she said quietly. Another knock echoed through the chamber. Ethan stared at the thick metal door separating them from the corridor outside. What happens if somebody answers it? Veilira's eyes remained fixed on the control panel lights. They stopped remembering which thoughts belonged to them. The words settled coldly inside Ethan's chest. He wanted to ask more questions, but something about her expression stopped him. Veilira did not speak like somebody telling stories. She sounded like somebody reciting scars. The knocking stopped abruptly. Silence returned once more. Then a little girl's voice drifted softly through the door. Mom? It is cold out here. Ethan watched the color drain from Veilira's face. Her hand tightened around the edge of the console hard enough for her knuckles to pale silver beneath the reactor glow. Do not open it, she whispered. The voice came again. Smaller this time. Sadder. Please. Ethan looked between the door and Veilira. He understood now why she kept the reactor sector sealed. The station did not attack with claws or weapons. It reached for loneliness instead. For grief. For the small, fragile parts of people that still wanted one impossible thing to be true. Veilira suddenly crossed the chamber and activated a secondary lockdown seal over the reactor entrance. Heavy steel barriers slid into place with a grinding metallic groan. Only after the final lock engaged did she finally step back and breathe again. Ethan studied her carefully. Those children in the picture. Veilira lowered her head slightly. Mila was the first voice it copied. The reactor hummed quietly beneath them while old warning lights blinked across the chamber walls. Ethan noticed then how exhausted she truly looked. Not physically, emotionally. Like somebody who had spent years holding a door closed with their bare hands. You have been alone too long, he said before thinking. Veilira gave a faint, humorless laugh. You say that like loneliness is unusual in space. Ethan leaned against the nearby railing, staring down into the blue reactor core below. There is lonely, he said quietly. Then there is 6 years talking to ghosts. Veilira did not answer immediately. Somewhere behind them, coolant pipes hissed softly through the walls. At first, she said at last, I still believed rescue ships would come. Her golden eyes drifted toward the sealed reactor door. Then they stopped answering distress calls. Ethan frowned. The Union abandoned the station? Veilira looked at him directly. No, her voice remained calm. They quarantined it. The realization hit Ethan slowly. His stomach tightened. They knew this thing was still alive. Veilira nodded once. And they knew I would not leave while there was still a chance of containment failure. Ethan looked around the chamber again with entirely different eyes now. The repaired systems. The handmade barriers. The carefully maintained reactor seals. None of this existed because Veilira was trapped here. She stayed willingly. The woman the galaxy called a monster had spent 6 years protecting people who abandoned her. Ethan let out a slow breath. You could have escaped. Veilira stared at the glowing reactor core below. Yes. Then why stay? For several seconds, only the hum of the station answered him. Then Veilira spoke so quietly Ethan almost missed it. Because I was afraid that if I left, her voice trembled slightly for the first time. Someone else would hear Mila calling for her mother and open the door. Ethan felt something heavy settle inside his chest. Not fear this time. Shame. Somewhere far above the reactor chamber, the station speakers crackled softly again. Then a calm male voice echoed through the darkness. Containment breach detected in Sector 12. Veilira's expression changed instantly. Real fear crossed her face for the first time since Ethan arrived. The reactor chamber seemed colder after the announcement. Ethan watched Veilira move across the control consoles with sudden urgency, her fingers flying over old cracked touchscreens that flickered blue beneath the emergency lighting. For the first time since he arrived, she looked uncertain. Not scared for herself. Scared of something escaping. "What is Sector 12? Ethan asked. Veolyra did not stop working. The original quarantine zone. Warning symbols flashed rapidly across the reactor displays now. Atmospheric pressure dropping. Internal seal failures. Reactor stability fluctuating by 3% every few seconds. Ethan stepped beside her and studied the station schematics spreading across the console. Entire corridors were turning red one after another. "That thing is moving." Veolyra nodded once. "It usually sleeps near the lower vents during cold cycles." Her voice tightened slightly. Something woke it. A low metallic groan rolled through the station beneath their feet. The floor trembled hard enough for loose tools to rattle across nearby shelves. Ethan grabbed the railing instinctively. Somewhere deep below them, massive doors were opening. The station speakers crackled softly again. This time the voice sounded calm. "Friendly. Emergency evacuation route available through docking bay 3. Ethan froze. That was the docking bay where his shuttle waited. "It wants me to leave," he said quietly. Veolyra finally looked at him directly. "No," she whispered. "It wants you alone." The lights flickered harder. For one brief second, the entire reactor chamber plunged into darkness. Ethan heard breathing somewhere nearby. Slow. Human. When the lights returned, nobody stood there except Veolyra. But the fear rising inside his chest remained. He hated that part most. The station never showed itself directly. It made people imagine the worst version on their own. Veolyra pulled open another console drawer and removed a small cylindrical device covered in worn silver markings. "What is that?" Ethan asked. "Portable pulse emitter." She handed it to him carefully. "If the voices become too convincing, activate it immediately." Ethan stared down at the device resting in his palm. "You are talking like this thing can get inside my head." Veolyra's silence answered before her words did. Then another voice echoed faintly through the corridor outside the reactor chamber. "Ethan." He closed his eyes instantly. No distortion this time. No mechanical interference. Just his younger brother's voice exactly as he remembered it at age 17. Warm. Familiar. Alive. Ethan slowly opened his eyes again. "My brother died in Denver 13 years ago," he said quietly. Veolyra looked exhausted already. "It searches memory first," she explained softly. "Then regret." The reactor chamber lights dimmed to a deep red emergency glow. Somewhere beyond the sealed doors, footsteps shuffled slowly through the corridors again. Not rushing. Wondering. Like something exploring the station with patient curiosity. Ethan glanced toward the reactor core behind them. If Sector 12 opens completely, what happens? Veolyra stared at the glowing blue energy field pulsing beneath the chamber floor. The signal reaches nearby systems. Ethan felt his stomach tighten immediately. Trade routes. Colonies. Civilian stations. Entire sectors connected by relay networks. "How many people know about this?" he asked. Veolyra gave a faint, humorless smile. "Fewer every year." Another tremor rolled through the station. Harder this time. One of the reactor monitors suddenly flashed a live camera feed from Sector 12. Ethan stepped closer automatically. The corridor on screen looked abandoned at first glance. Flickering lights. Empty floor. Thick frost spreading across the walls. Then he noticed the shadows moving at the far end. Not bodies. Reflections. Human silhouettes appearing briefly against the metal walls before vanishing again. One of them stopped and slowly turned toward the camera. Ethan's blood ran cold. It looked exactly like him. Same height. Same jacket. Same tired eyes staring directly into the lens. The copy smiled faintly. Then the camera feed died. Silence settled across the reactor chamber. Veolyra looked toward the sealed reactor doors with visible dread now. "It has never done that before," she whispered. Then, somewhere directly above them, Ethan heard a child laughing inside the ventilation shaft. The laughter above them stopped so suddenly that the silence felt louder afterward. Ethan kept staring at the dead monitor where his own face had smiled moments earlier. The image still lingered in his mind with terrifying clarity. Same tired eyes. Same scar beneath the chin. But there had been something wrong about the smile. Too calm. Too knowing. Like a reflection learning how to become human by watching from the dark. Veolyra moved quickly across the reactor chamber, activating manual containment locks one after another. Heavy steel barriers groaned shut somewhere deep inside the station. Red warning symbols pulsed across the consoles now, washing the chamber in waves of crimson light. "The pulse field is weakening," she said quietly. Ethan tore his eyes away from the monitor. "Can we fix it?" Veilira hesitated just long enough for him to understand the answer before she spoke. "Only from Sector 12. Ethan let out a slow breath through clenched teeth. "Of course it has to be Sector 12. Another tremor rolled beneath the floor. This time the reactor lights flickered violently enough for sparks to burst from one of the ceiling panels. Ethan looked toward the sealed corridor doors. "Then we go together." Veilira stopped moving. For several seconds, she simply stared at him like she had misunderstood the sentence entirely. "No," she said finally. "You leave now." Ethan almost laughed from disbelief. "You think I am walking back through this station alone? You still have a shuttle." Her voice remained calm, but exhaustion bled through every word now. "The docking corridor remains open for another 17 minutes. Ethan folded his arms slowly across his chest. "You memorized the timer." Veilira looked away. "I always do." Something about the way she said it hit Ethan harder than he expected. Not fear. Resignation. Like she had watched rescue opportunities disappear before and already accepted how this story ended for her. Ethan glanced around the reactor chamber again. The blankets folded near the wall. The coffee cups still steaming faintly beside the console. The carved names outside. 6 years holding this nightmare together alone while the galaxy called her a monster. "You really thought nobody would come back for you," he said quietly. Veilira gave a faint smile that carried no warmth at all. "Someone did come back once." Ethan frowned slightly. "What happened?" Her golden eyes lowered toward the floor. He opened the wrong door. Silence settled between them again except for the low reactor hum beneath their feet. Ethan noticed then that Veilira's hands were trembling slightly while she worked the controls. Fatigue. Stress. Maybe both. Without thinking much about it, he reached over and steadied the shaking panel with one hand while she finished adjusting the settings. Veilira froze briefly at the contact. Ethan stepped back immediately. "Sorry." But Veilira did not move away. Her eyes remained fixed on the control panel for several seconds before she spoke quietly. "Most people avoid touching me after they learn my name." Ethan leaned against the nearby console. "Most people never spent 6 years listening to dead children inside air vents." The reactor chamber fell silent again. Then something changed in Veilira's expression. Small, fragile, like a crack appearing in thick ice. Before either of them could speak again, the station lights suddenly died completely. Darkness swallowed the chamber. Ethan heard the reactor still humming somewhere below, but now another sound moved through the blackness around them. Whispering. Hundreds of overlapping voices drifting softly through the walls. Human voices. Alien voices. Familiar voices. "Ethan," his mother whispered nearby. "Please," his brother said somewhere behind him. Then a little girl's voice echoed directly beside Veilira in the dark. "Mom, why did you leave us?" Ethan heard her sharp inhale immediately. For the first time since meeting her, Veilira sounded afraid. Truly afraid. Ethan activated the portable pulse emitter instantly. A deep mechanical vibration burst outward through the chamber. The whispers distorted violently before cutting off all at once. Emergency. Lights flickered back online seconds later. Ethan looked toward Veilira. She stood perfectly still beside the console, eyes closed tightly like somebody trying not to fall apart in front of him. Then she whispered something so quietly he almost missed it. "I am tired of hearing them die every night." The reactor chamber shook hard enough to send dust cascading from the ceiling vents. Warning alarms erupted across the station in overlapping waves while red emergency lights pulsed like a dying heartbeat through the darkness. Ethan steadied himself against the console as the reactor core below flickered violently between blue and black. Veilira opened her eyes slowly after the pulse emitter silenced the voices. For a moment, she simply stood there breathing carefully, trying to pull herself back together. Then the station speakers crackled alive again. "Containment failure progressing," the calm voice announced. "Sector 12 access unlocked." Ethan looked toward the sealed reactor doors as heavy metal locks disengaged one after another somewhere beyond the chamber. Veilira immediately reached for the emergency override controls. Nothing happened. Her expression hardened. It disabled manual locks. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and clipped the pulse emitter onto his belt. Then we shut it down directly. Veolyra turned toward him sharply. You still do not understand. Her golden eyes burned brighter beneath the flashing red lights now. The closer you get to Sector 12, the harder it becomes to remember what is real. Ethan held her gaze steadily. Then good thing I am not going alone. The station groaned around them like some enormous dying machine. For several seconds Veolyra looked at him with an expression Ethan could not fully read. Confusion maybe, or disbelief. Like kindness had become so unfamiliar, she no longer trusted herself to recognize it. Finally she reached toward a nearby locker and removed a small silver data chip. If containment fails completely, she said quietly, placing it into his hand, take this to the Union Council. Ethan looked down at the chip. What is it? The station logs. The real ones. Her voice softened slightly. Proof that the crew were never abandoned by a monster. Ethan closed his fingers around the chip slowly. You should be the one delivering this. Veolyra looked away first. Nobody would listen to me. Before Ethan could answer, the corridor outside erupted with distant whispers again. Hundreds of voices overlapping softly through the walls. The station lights dimmed lower. Then footsteps approached the reactor entrance. Slow, uneven, human. Ethan instinctively moved closer beside Veolyra as the sealed reactor doors slid open inch by inch with a long metallic groan. Cold air spilled into the chamber, carrying faint whispers with it. Shapes stood beyond the doorway. Human silhouettes. Alien silhouettes. Motionless beneath the flickering corridor lights. Ethan tightened his grip on the pulse emitter. They are not real, Veolyra whispered. One of the figures stepped forward slightly. A little girl wearing a yellow sweater. Ethan immediately recognized the photographed face. Mila. The child looked up at Veolyra with wide, frightened eyes. Mom, she whispered softly. Ethan felt Veolyra freeze beside him. Her breathing became shallow instantly. For one terrible second, he thought she might walk forward. Then Ethan reached down quietly and took her trembling hand before she could move. Veolyra stared at him in shock. Ethan did not let go. You already carried this place long enough, he said quietly. The little girl in the doorway smiled strangely after hearing that. Not like a child. Like something practicing emotion. The corridor lights flickered violently. The illusion shattered. The figures dissolved into shifting shadows against the walls. Then the entire station suddenly fell silent. Completely silent. No alarms. No whispers. No footsteps. Even the reactor hum beneath the floor seemed quieter somehow. Veolyra slowly looked down at Ethan's hand still holding hers. Nobody moved. Somewhere beyond the observation windows, stars